Do miniature terrariums last, and should you build them? In this video, we will dive into the world of miniature terrariums and take a close look at some of the smaller ones I have built. I will also make another mini terrarium towards the end of this video. It will be necessary for me to lay down in the beginning what I consider a miniature terrarium. Terrariums in my collection, which are under 500 ml and measures less than 5 inches in height, are listed in this category. This is completely my definition and may vary from others because there are no specific rules to define a standard. I have built several miniature terrariums in the last couple of years. Some of them are doing very well, while others have perished. This is the Nescafe jar terrarium. It was built in July 2022, so it's a year old now. This was an aquascape inspired design. To create the look, pieces of driftwood were joined together with superglue. Moss and dwarf epiphytic plants were planted on it. The wooden scape was placed inside a jar on a bed of soil and sand with moss around it. It was a satisfying build and remains one of my most favorite. I will leave a link to the detailed build video in the description. 1 year later, it looks very much grown in. I have done a few rounds of maintenance on it, which consisted of mainly trimming the moss and giving it a misting. I attribute the success of this terrarium to 3 things: the choice of compatible moss and plants, the horizontal usage of the jar for optimum light exposure, and regular observation and periodic maintenance. Next is this tree trunk terrarium in a 300 ml container. It was built in September last year. A shorts video covering the build is on the channel. It is a forest-themed terrarium with a driftwood as the centerpiece, giving the impression of a tree trunk in a forest. Layering consists of a lava rock false bottom and my terrarium substrate above it. Along with moss, it was planted with mini bulbitis, cuttings of Ficus pumila minima and Paeonia repens. Fast forward 10 months and this tiny ecosystem is thriving. Mini bulbitis is a dwarf species and a slow grower. The other 2 plants have also adapted to the environment and showing slow growth. The limitation in nutrient availability in small closed ecosystems is also a factor for this. The bulbitis has a couple of leaves with brown tips, but I think it is just natural aging of the plant because I also see a lot of new growth. 3 rounds of maintenance has been done on this terrarium, and these sessions were also covered in short format videos on the channel. This mini terrarium in a cork lid bottle was built in January 2022, so it's a little over 1.5 years old. It is a simple build with moss and plants and is devoid of any hardscape. It was built using aqua soil as substrate and aquatic plants which included mini bulbitis, Staurogyne repens and a tiny Anubias nanapetit. The sheet moss in the foreground had mold issues and hence it was replaced with patches of Utricularia a couple of months later. One of the challenges with bottles like this lies in the cork lid. It absorbs moisture which eventually evaporates out. As the cork dries out, it becomes loose and develops air gaps which results in further loss of moisture. Due to this, an established water cycle never gets to develop. The cork also degrades over a period of time. I have regularly put in a few drops of water in this terrarium to account for the loss of moisture. I have also trimmed the plants a couple of times. The Anubias was removed and rehoused in a grow box as it was turning brown. The terrarium is doing fine as you can see, but I always need to keep a close watch and keep watering it regularly. Continuing with cork lid bottle terrariums, I have this one which is growing out nicely. It was built in January this year. Notice how the Selaginella is giving out aerial roots. The moss has grown in tall leggy strands and covered the foreground. This is typically how moss grows inside a closed terrarium. Let me trim it down a bit. Meanwhile, you can enjoy the build video in a split screen alongside. The tiny Wabikusa terrarium was built in August last year and doing better than I had expected. I have trimmed it once. The water evaporates fast, so I fill up the base with water every other week. This miniature wick planted terrarium was built around the same time. It was built with a hydroponic wick cord shaped with a copper wire and wrapped in moss. It was detailed with tiny pieces of twigs and planted with Anubias and Selaginella. I was apprehensive about the copper wire leaching and killing the moss and plants. However, as you can see, it is holding up pretty well after about a year. I will leave a link to the build video in the description. This is the smallest one that I have. It is 6 months old. It was designed as a pendant, but I have removed the hook and the leather rope. It looks a little on the drier side, so I will put in a few drops of water with my pipette. Here are 2 terrariums that did not make it, and I will have to bear the blame for their failure. They were placed in a corner and out of sight, and I had completely forgotten to water them. By the time I noticed, it was already too late. The Apple EarPod mossarium was built in June 2022 as part of my World Environment Day post. It has been over a year and it is doing extremely well. I have trimmed the moss a couple of times and it always grows back. The mini grassland terrarium in a plastic container was built on 8th September last year. It was built using utricularia and tiny plants on an aqua soil base. The inside tray was fixed with hot glue, but it has come off. Otherwise, it is doing pretty well after 10 months. So do miniature terrariums last? I would say yes, but it will depend on a few factors. How long do miniature terrariums last? Well, at this point, I can say definitely more than a year, but I am sure they can last way longer with regular care and maintenance. And should you build them? Yes, by all means. You will always have the option to rehome them in a bigger container when they outgrow the small ones. I thoroughly enjoy building these mini ecosystems and it is quite addictive, I must admit. I am sure you will enjoy building them as well. But do keep a few things in mind if you want them to last longer. Get the right container. I recommend something not less than 250 ml and with a transparent lid. Use minimal hardscape, avoid wood if possible and stick to rocks. Wooden hardscape are more prone to mold. Keep a close watch for any changes in moisture levels, plant health or mold formation. Use dwarf plant species. Aquatic tissue culture plants work best. Here is a list of 5 plants that you can use in small terrariums. Mini bulbitis for background, Anubias nana petite, Selaginella uncinata and small cuttings of Paeonia repens for midground. Moss and Ficus pimila minima for the foreground. Let us now proceed to make a miniature terrarium in alignment with these pointers. I am using a 300 ml glass container with a transparent lid for this build. I will use black lava rocks to create a drainage layer. I pour in my terrarium substrate mix directly over this layer. A separate charcoal layer will not be necessary as it is already mixed with the substrate. I am using this piece of rock for my hardscape. I position it on the soil and add a smaller piece in front to support it. I mist the terrarium and start placing moss to cover the soil. I plant cuttings of moss from one of my older terrariums to create a background. I also place another small rock in the background to create some depth. I take a Selaginella cutting and plant it behind the stone. I place one more small cutting alongside it. I add pea gravel in the foreground and blend it with the stone and moss with a brush. I plant cuttings of Ficus pimila minima on the moss and a Paeonia repens behind the stone. A small Anubias nana petite is placed in the foreground in front of the stone. I will now drop in some springtails to keep a check on any mold outbreak which is common in a newly built terrarium. Our miniature terrarium build is complete. I really like the outcome and now I have one more to add to my collection. I hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.